Hello, and welcome to our discussion of consumer behavior, which means we're already to week 4 of the semester. Whoa, we having fun or what? Well, I'm having fun. All right, so what we're going to do in this discussion is we're going to briefly define what's meant by consumer behavior. We're going to talk about some influences on consumer behavior, and then we're going to look at the consumer or the buyer decision-making process. Excuse me. So first thing is to provide a definition and have my handy-dandy glasses so that I can look at my notes and read them. And so a definition of consumer behavior is the behavior of individuals and households in terms of purchasing for personal consumption. So again, consumer behavior can refer to the behavior of individuals and households in terms of purchasing for personal consumption. And it's part of the thing is that you have to understand that there's also organizational buying behavior. So, for example, John Carroll University is an organization, and it buys a lot of different things. In fact, I had to place an order this morning for a new cartridge for my laser printer. Individuals and households order things. You may order a cartridge for your laser printer, right? But the way that consumers buy things, right, the individuals and households buy things are very different than the way organizations buy things. So, for example, organizations often have a purchasing department, right? Individuals and households, I mean, if you're an individual, right, and you're not married and you're living away from your parents and things like that, you're pretty much your own purchasing department. So the point is that individuals and households have a very different way of purchasing goods and services than do organizations. And in consumer behavior, we're looking at what individuals and households do as opposed to what organizations do. Okay. So, as promised, we will discuss some influences on consumer behavior, and I'm going to deviate a little bit from the book, and I like to talk about culture as a kind of a standalone influence. Your book includes culture as part of a larger influence. I think culture is important enough to stand on its own. And so a definition, and as somebody who way early in my life, when I was your age or close to your age, when I was an undergraduate, I was an anthropology major, and so anthropology study culture, so God only knows. There are tons and tons and tons of definitions of anthropology. Here's a definition of anthropology. Excuse me, of culture. I'm sorry, definition of culture. A set of basic values, perceptions, wants, and behaviors learned by members of society from important institutions. So again, a set of basic values, perceptions, wants, and behaviors learned by members of society from important institutions. And those important institutions can be a variety of things. So for example, we had talked earlier in an earlier discussion about how religion can influence things, and religion, which is part of culture, I mean, that would be considered an important institution. Religion can have a really important impact on consumer behavior in the sense that, if you look at the Muslim religion, one thing is the Muslims don't eat pork. Certain sects of the Muslim religion are very, very definitive in how women must present themselves when they're out in public. So you will see oftentimes headwear, or even like a hijab, which and basically you're only seeing maybe the eyes, right? Everything else is covered. And we're not here to judge whether it's right or it's wrong. but you start to get a sense for, wow, culture can have a real impact, and religion as a part of culture can have a real impact on consumer behavior. And so, as a culture, for example, one of the things that in the United States we tend not to do is we tend not to eat dog meat. There are cultures of the world that eat dog meat, and you go, ooh, that's not, because we think of dogs as a pet, right? In the United States and in many Western countries view dogs as pets. And I'm not saying that it's right or it's wrong. It just is, right? So, culture is a huge, huge impact on consumer behavior. The types of clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, how we eat our food, right? I told you I got back from China. Think about how the Chinese tend to eat their food. They tend to eat it with chopsticks and maybe a soup spoon, right? You don't tend to see a lot of knives and forks. So, culture, again, tremendous impact on consumer behavior. Second impact on consumer behavior is family. And there's a lot of people that believe that family represents the most important influence on consumer behavior. And, what I'd like you to do, and obviously you can't answer this, but, just think about how your family has influenced your consumer behavior. And you say, well, give me some help, big boy. Give me some help in how my family would have influenced my consumer behavior. The types of food that you eat, the brands that you eat, where you shop. For example, do you shop do you go to Kohl's or do you go to Dillard's? Um, what brand of gasoline do you buy? Where do you go for, fast food? Do you go to Panera? Do you go to Dunkin' Donuts? Do you go to McDonald's? I mean, all these kinds of things. And again, it's not right or it's not wrong, but you start to get a sense for, wow, my family's had a real impact on my consumer behavior. If you look at this class, for example, and I don't know, I don't get a real detailed list of everybody who's in the class. But if you are the child of somebody who went to John Carroll, there's a tremendous influence there, right? There's actually a word there. You're a legacy. You're either the child and increasingly the grandchild of somebody who attended a particular university. All right, so family can play a tremendous impact, has a tremendous impact on consumer behavior. And then a third key influence involves social factors, and a social factor that can influence, and there's a lot of them, is something called a reference group. And a reference group is either individuals or a group who influences a person's beliefs, feelings, or behaviors. So again, a reference group is individuals or groups who influence a person's beliefs, feelings, or behaviors. So for example, if you're a member of a fraternity or if you're a member of a sorority, how does the world know that you're a member of a fraternity or sorority? Well, oftentimes you will wear clothing that has Greek letters on it. Go figure, right? Right? If you play rugby, someone of you mentioned in your um, introduction that you play rugby. Now, it's pretty well known that after rugby matches, rugby players drink beer. Hey, right? Play golf, go. Sometimes you'll drink beer, or you'll have a beverage, and you'll sit around and talk right after your round of golf. So you think about reference groups, right, and the kinds of impacts that they can have on one's behavior. The reason I was laughing is that sometimes people view college professors as not being wonderful dressers, being fashion challenged in many cases. And my apologies. We're doing this in the summer and we're doing this electronically, but if you take me face to face, I always wear a suit, I always wear a tie. And I tell my students I'm on a one-person crusade to rid the world of the notion that college professors are terrible dressers and or fashion challenged. And part of the reason is that, you know, most of us went through a doctoral program, and our reference group were other doctoral students as well as other professors, and you see kind of how your professors dressed, and you go, well, hell, it worked for them. Why shouldn't I try it? Right? So, you know, you think about, you know, how the reference group, those of you, and I know a number of you have mentioned that you're accountancy students. You know, some of the big four firms still have pretty, you know, pretty strict, although lessening, rules on, you know, what appropriate attire is in the workplace. All right. So then a fourth thing that we'll talk about, fourth factor is a situational factor, and this is one of the things that makes marketing research, consumer behavior, so challenging, and what makes marketing so challenging is we got all these things going on, and then we got the old situational factors, right? And consumer behavior can vary based upon the situation. So an example I like to use is you know, when you first, like, well, when I first started going out with my wife a long, long time ago, right? And he got hungry. You know, the first couple of times we went out to eat, you know, we weren't going to Taco Bell or places like that, right? And he was like, no, 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 because the Paul man here did not want to send a particular message that the Paul man was that Paul was cheap, right? So he tended to go to nicer restaurants. But as the relationship progressed, right, the situation's the same. We're still hungry, right? But maybe you go to Taco Bell, right? So the situational factors have a tremendous impact on consumer behavior as well. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about influences on consumer behavior, and we'll spend the rest of the time discussing the consumer decision-making process. So the first, and this is sequential. All right, the first stage in the consumer decision-making process is need recognition, difference between an actual and a desired state. So, you know, you don't want to be thirsty. You're thirsty. You don't want to be thirsty. Okay, I need something to drink. What is that? So there's the need recognition. Okay. Second thing is information search, right? And depending on the type of consumer decision making that you're doing, right? If you're doing like habitual decision making, you're not taking, you know, you're not taking a lot of time, right? I'm thirsty. I want something to drink. Gee, I like Diet Coke. I'm going to have a Diet Coke. Bingo, you're done. Others, which are called extended problem solving, right? The information search is going to take or should take longer, and the information can come from internal search, right, which is basically information that you have. Right? So as you get older, you got a lot more information. Okay, you know, like I said, I'll be 62 in August. Yes, I will. I hope I don't look 62. Yeah. So I got a lot of stored up information about a lot of different things. Most of you are much younger than that, and so when you go to make decisions, your store of information, your internal locus, you don't have as much internal information. So there's internal search. There's also external search, and one of the things that's really changed a lot, particularly with the evolution of technology, is the ability to do external search. I mean, there's so much more information that's now not only out there, but easily accessible and in many cases inexpensive. So, you know, one of the things that I like to talk about is how the car buying process, right, new car buying process, has changed dramatically with the evolution of technology, because you as the prospective buyer, or if you're going to lease the car, you can get so much more information than back when I was your age. And you know, when a consumer has more information, it gives them the ability to make hopefully better decisions. All right, so the information search. So you've got the problem, the need recognition, you've got the information search, and then the information search is going to basically lead you to a set of alternatives, which leads to the third stage, which is evaluating alternatives. And your book talks about, with respect to evaluating alternatives, your book talks about what is known as an evoke set. And the evoke set refers to brands or stores that a consumer will actually consider. And so, for example, when I'm thinking about my next car, I currently lease a car. My next car I'm going to lease in 2017 because my 3-year lease is up in 2017. The evoke set for me is um, you know what are the ones that I would actually consider, not my wish list, right? Unfortunately, John Carroll, profs in the business school, we don't make enough money to be looking at Lambos and cars of that nature. So I've had a BMW for a number of years, so it's probably going to be a BMW, maybe a Nissan, maybe something else, but definitely not a Lambo or a Maserati or something of that nature. And the significance of the evoke set is that marketers will try really hard to get into somebody's evoke set because those basically become the alternatives from which the customer is going to make his or her decision. So evaluating alternatives, and what are you looking at? You're looking at, gee, what's the cost? What kinds of benefits are there? I mean, if you're looking at automobiles, some of the things you might want to look at are, what is the gas mileage? What is the annual upkeep, right? What is a resale value? Things of that nature. Okay, so we've talked about need recognition. We've talked about the information search. We've talked about evaluating alternatives. And then the next stage is the purchase and consumption. Yay, simple enough. Sign on the dotted line and we're done. But we're not done. Okay, because there's a fifth stage in the consumer decision-making process, and that refers to the post-purchase phase. And your book talks about a number of different things with respect to post-purchase phase. Say that twice or 3 times really fast. And one of the things that I like to talk about is what's a concept known as post-purchase dissonance. Okay, post-purchase dissonance, and that refers to post-purchase anxiety that comes from a conflict between beliefs and behaviors. So again, post-purchase anxiety that comes from a conflict between beliefs and behaviors. Basically, what you're doing is you're asking the question, did I make the right decision? And this post-purchase dissonance tends to manifest itself when you're dealing with what are known as high involvement, meaning there's a lot of interest and a lot of time, right, spent associated with the decision, as well as high price decisions. So again, the post-purchase dissonance tends to be highest with high involvement and high price decisions. And so, the most expensive purchase that most people will make in their lifetime is a house. And so there can be a lot of, people will just sit there and after they bought a house, they'll go, oh my God, did I buy the right house? Am I in the right neighborhood? Did I pay too much? Is the school system as good as I thought it was? What are the city services like? I mean, there's this whole laundry list of doubt, in part because, many people are taking out 30-year mortgages. That's a long time, right? I mean, it's like, and if you've made a bad decision, you're paying for it for, literally you're paying for it for 30 years. And so there's a company, there's a real estate company called Howard Hanna, based out of Pittsburgh. And Howard Hanna came up with a real interesting solution or way of dealing with post-purchase dissonance with respect to household purchases. And they came up with this idea of a money-back guarantee. And nobody had ever done it. Literally, nobody had ever done it. And in fact, some of the longer standing, at least in the Cleveland market, some of the longer standing real estate companies said, well, those guys are idiots, right? Nobody's ever done it. This is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And the idea behind the money back guarantee is you buy a house from Howard Hanna, and if you don't like it, they'll buy it back from you within a year for what you paid for it. Right? So it's tremendous, and one of the upshots of that whole process is that the real estate companies that said it was the dumbest idea they ever heard, they ended up being bought out by Howard Hanna because Howard Hanna became such a dominant player in the Northeast Ohio real estate market, because they came up with it. They looked at it from the customer's perspective. How do we soothe the dissonance, right, that comes from